So Raman, thank you so much for inviting me to this lovely campus. It is a great place, it's hard to believe that there is such a great, vast, expansive space like this in a concrete jungle like Mumbai.
Yeah.
But before that, I would like to know a little bit about you. You've had a prolific corporate, career. What enticed you after such an illustrious career to be part of KJ Somaiya Institute of Management?
Okay, so let me start by giving you a very quick high-level overview of my career because it actually has 3 phases in it. So the early part was in academics and research. So post-PhD, I spent about 6 years doing postdoctoral research work in different parts of the world, culminating in University of Wisconsin in Madison. Then I moved into the corporate world, and from R&D into marketing, business development, and then into running businesses, and that's what I did for close to 3 decades. Right? Now this very interesting question now, how did I end up in an educational institution post that fairly long? Many times careers are made or unmade due to coincidences. And there was a coincidence where I happened to be in Delhi and happened to be staying in a hotel where the chancellor of this university was also staying, and we had known each other for a while, and we decided to have breakfast together. And the next day morning he asked me what I was doing, and I said I'm just kind of finishing up my assignment with a particular company as MD CEO, and I'm really looking forward to taking time off, spending more time coaching executives and pursuing some of my passion. And he said, no, don't give up so quickly. Please come and work with us in our business school. And I thought that's an interesting proposition. I had a natural kind of, passion to talk, right? Talk in front of, I was comfortable talking in front of fairly large groups of people. So I thought, okay, this might be an opportunity to kind of go back to a dream that once I had in my younger years to be a faculty. So that's how I ended up here in the educational institution. There is a second part to it, which is that over the last about 10-15 years, I've realized that one of my purpose, and maybe one of the things that I'm good at, is really helping individuals and helping organizations to realize their full potential. So one of the things I do is to coach executives, right, and to unlock that potential. And in corporate world, at least in the last 10-15 years, a lot of my work has been around change management to really take their organization to the next level. So I thought maybe here is an opportunity to really contribute by, helping an organization to kind of live well above what they are currently doing and live to their potential. So that's what brought me here to the education institution.
That lovely coincidence has really been a great blessing
Absolutely.
For the students.
Well, you'll have to ask the students, but it's certainly been a blessing for me, yeah.
Well, you spoke about change management, right?
Yeah.
And while you're talking about, if you don't mind, I would love to explore your campus, and I'm sorry I'm going to make you walk.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, talking about change management, one of the things that I've realized, and I'm sure you would concur with me, is the fact that in the evolving business landscape, what according to you is now the relevance and the prevalence of management studies? So what is your take on that?
It's a very good question, and my response to this is that, look, at the end of the day, technology disruptions, all these things has been there and will continue to be there.
Okay.
But the principles of management have not really changed, right? And a business school really teaches the principles of management along with all the various new technologies that are kind of coming up and disrupting businesses. So the relevance of MBA will continue, but MBA has to evolve from the way it was, and it has evolved from the way it was maybe 30-40 years ago, where what you taught in the classrooms essentially was applicable and helped the business graduate to navigate the realms of the enterprise for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Today what is happening is that what they learn in the class probably already becomes irrelevant by the time they graduate. Yeah? And there is a World Bank report which says that 1 out of every 4 jobs are likely to completely change in the next 10 to 20 years. So what this means is that MBAs need to change. The way subjects are taught needs to change. What students come in here for has to change. So one of the key differentiator for a successful student is going to be ability to learn quickly, agility to learn. It will be learning, competencies and capabilities like resilience. How do you bounce back from a setback? Because, there are going to be a lot of setbacks. The frequency of disruptions and setbacks for an individual in an organization is going to be huge. How are we going to adapt very quickly? How are we going to learn to work with teams and not individually? So these are all going to be the capabilities that are going to really help students navigate the work of future. And I think the business school needs to change the curriculum. I mean, they've always been doing this, but the emphasis on these kinds of aspects of human capabilities has got to be much higher. So yes, the short answer is MBA is going to continue to be relevant, but what you learn in that MBA is going to be very different from what you learned probably 10 or 20 years ago.
So when you're talking about the relevance and the fact that MBAs and business school graduates are something that are going to be very important for the business world.
Yeah.
At the same time, on one hand, we are seeing that a lot of companies, the traditional recruiters of MBAs, are now scaling back or actually are putting a stop when it comes to their recruitment plans.
Yes.
Now, I want to understand from you, and I'm sure a lot of students would also like to understand, is this something which is a blimp? Is it something which is very transient? Or is it a sign of, again, another evolutionary curve?
So let's look at what might be behind this. My own hypothesis is that there are quite a number of geopolitical and other disruptions that are currently happening, which leaves an organization and individual a little bit worried about what's going to happen in future, right? I mean, the future has become a little bit unpredictable, whether it is the Palestine-Israel conflict or the Ukraine-Russian or the advent of generative AI and how it is presumably kind of taking away jobs at a very rapid speed, etc., etc. So all these things cause certain concern if you are the CEO of the company and if you are. So the natural instinct is then to play safe, right? And the area where everybody plays safe is that let's try and not hire people at this point in time. Let's kind of wait and see what's going to happen. So I believe that what we are currently seeing is this response to this, changes or the geopolitical and the technological disruptions that are happening, and organizations and people at the top kind of wanting to play it safe and not take that risk. So it is, in my opinion, a blip, particularly in a country like India, where if you have to go from 3 trillion to 5 trillion to 10 trillion, you can't do that. There's only so much of that wealth that you can create using automation, technology, etc. You will need people to drive those GDP. It will not happen by just the conventional approaches of the government investing into projects or some companies. There will be a lot more entrepreneurship that will need to happen, right? So jobs will be created. So I believe what we're seeing is a temporary phenomenon, and we have seen this before, right? I mean, this is nothing new. There have been such events in the past as well, where people have pulled back, but I'm very, very bullish about, India in particular, because we are, as you know, one of the growth engines of the world today, and will continue to be for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so jobs will be created, and we will need talented young people, and we are also lucky that we have a lot of talented young people to offer to the world.
So you've had a very long, illustrious career spanning over 3 decades. 22 years in BASF, which is a chemical behemoth. In those years, how have you seen, like the current recessionary kind of a trend or the pullback that you're seeing from the companies when it comes to recruiting MBAs? Have you seen these kind of, ups and downs in the past as well?
No, certainly. And I think there are two factors which generally drive companies into what one calls as a hiring freeze, right? I mean, so one is external factors, like for instance, the 2008 financial crisis was a great example. Big companies were basically going bankrupt, and there was great concern as to what is this going to do to the industry and the economy overall. And the first reaction of companies, including companies like BSF, was to put a freeze on hiring across the world. It doesn't matter whether it is a 150,000 euro job in Europe or a 5 lakh job in India. You froze. The COVID is another great example where almost across the world, companies, because of the uncertainty of what's the future going to be like, have resorted to this, freezing or not hiring kind of position. But then you have always seen that they come back with a vengeance. So post-COVID hirings, was really, we had a couple of years of very good time, from a business school perspective, and it's kind of starting to plateau off, right? There are sometimes internal factors, right? Due to certain internal factors, your profitability gets affected, and you're trying to then go through this difficult time. And again, another situation where typically companies would then stop hiring for a period of time.
Okay, so the traditional hirers are the ones who are holding back. What has been noticed is that the non-traditional guys, like the startups, they are the ones who have come to the front, and they are the ones who are really getting the best pick of the crop. Is this something that you've also noticed in KJ Somaiya? Are you seeing a lot of the MBA graduates being picked up by the startups?
So there are, I wouldn't say the early startups, but the startups, who are probably 3-4 years on the way to stabilizing. We have seen some hiring, but have they been a very substantial part of our hiring portfolio? I would not probably say yes, but we are starting definitely to see startups hiring more than what we have seen in the past. But so you are right, yeah. But look, if you looked at the landscape, what's happening in the last year or so, across India, as you said, there has been a bit of a challenge for business schools to place their graduates. But there are also been sector kind of specific trends. So obviously, IT companies have kind of refrained from hiring, number of hypothetical reasons that have been proposed for it. But BFSI has, not been gung-ho, but certainly have been hiring. And within BFSI, you again see fintech. So you're going back to your startup thing. We have seen fintechs hiring more than the traditional kind of banks. So there are sector-specific. Consulting is again kind of, been a bit on the low key, mainly again because if companies are not bullish, the first sector that gets affected are the consultants, right? And yeah. So we have seen these small blips and sector-specific kind of changes. Some of it have been okay. They're still hiring. Maybe there's no increase in hiring, but they are at the steady state, so to speak. Some have decreased. Yeah.
And this goes back to what you mentioned earlier, resilience, right? This is where you can actually tell your students that this is where you can put your resilience, whatever we have taught you to test. So how exactly go about teaching students resilience? Because it's a very simple word, but it has a lot of profundity attached to it. So what is it that you teach when it comes to resilience in the corporate world to your students?
So I think there is the scope to teach resilience is, it's how you kind of develop your pedagogy, when you teach resilience. It could be simple things like, you're having, but let's say a simulated kind of an exercise, and right in the middle, you change the rules of the game, right? And then the students have to really kind of think about how do we now deal with these new sets of rules. Some students cope with these situations better, some kind of go into a bit of a hole. So you can see very, very clear, distinct patterns on how students react. So that's resilience, and we kind of, explain to them then this is something that you're going to be dealing with in real life. Projects, how does this happen in real life? You're working on a project, right? And you worked 8 months, and then something happens and the project gets canned, right? Now it calls for a lot of resilience to come out of it, because it's 8 months of your sweat and blood that you've lost, but it's not the end of the world, right? So that's the so it's through conversations. The other way that we are really helping students recognize this is, and we have an initiative called Careers and Conversations, where every month we bring CEOs and CXOs and very successful entrepreneurs into the campus. And we have a kind of a conversation with that individual. Most of the time I do it, otherwise some senior faculty. And it is essentially a walk through their career and delving into exactly topics like this. Where did they fail? How did they bounce back? What kind of leadership philosophy do they adopt? And these are places where they get to hear real life people who are successful, who talk about some of the failures in their life, right? We had one of our alumni who is Vikram Bhatt, who runs the Enrich Saloons. He talked about how he's actually studied here, right? And he failed in his 3rd year or something. It's a big failure, and 30, 40 years ago you fail in a year. It's a big dogma that hangs around you for a long time. But then he bounced back, he became got his MBA, became a successful entrepreneur. Yeah. So I think those stories like that also help students to understand the concept of resilience. Yeah. It's a difficult concept, but yes.
But there's this other very difficult concept that most of the students are grappling with, Gen AI. Yes. Right? Many of them are worried that Gen AI is going to be the death knell of their careers, because they think that they'll be ousted, and their role as a graduate will probably be diminished because technology will take over. Do you see that happening anytime in the future? Do you see Gen AI becoming the kind of threat that it is made out to be? And if so, how do you actually guide your students to navigate the whole transformation that is taking place in the industry?
Okay. So let me address the question of Gen AI. I think it is something that you cannot ignore. From an educational institution point of view, there is a bit of a risk and a concern that will this tool be used by our students, and will it kind of replace thinking and inhibit thinking, right? But the fact is, Gen AI is an enormous efficiency improving tool. So we are currently in the process of thinking about how do we make sure that we position this as an efficiency improving tool and not as a substitute for thinking, and in fact maybe even to enhance thinking. A great kind of utility of AI is that you could even help students, because when you have a cohort of 600 students, the learning ability of the students are very different. You could potentially develop modules which allow students to learn at their pace, right? So there are lots of utility around it, but from a business school, I think what we are trying to, and I wouldn't say we have a solution yet for it, is how do we teach this to be an efficiency improvement tool and not a substitute to thinking, right? So that's one. Will it take away large number of jobs? I think because it's improving efficiency, it will take away jobs at the lower end of certain organizations, but I think it will also increase the demand for people at higher and better skills. So I don't think it's going to completely take away. As I said, the reports say that 1 in 4 jobs will change. It doesn't say it will get eliminated. And people like us who have been around for a long time, we have seen technologies coming and people thinking that this is the end of the world for a particular profession. And I'll give you a classic example, dating back to the 30s when DDT was discovered, right? And there is a whole group of people who study insects and who are working on trying to control insects. They said our profession is dead because there is this wonder drug that has come. It kills everything. But that single molecule probably produced more chemists and entomologists and biologists who studied this realm, because all the issues and things that came up with that particular tool, right? So I believe that we're not seeing the end of employment. The way things are going to be, the way organizations are going to be structured is probably going to change. Yeah, maybe not necessarily due to Gen AI, due to such technological disruptions. See, current organizations are defined by jobs, right? So there are jobs, there are titles, there are job descriptions. And this is my view, this is extensive research that Deloitte has done, and they have recently published The Future of Work. And one of their fundamental theory is that, future organizations will be skill-based and not job-based. Yeah. So in other words, every organization will have a set of people with a portfolio of skills that they have. And depending on the need, there will be a, formation of teams, etc. So I think this is also something that we are thinking about in a business school. If that's the future of the organization, how do we kind of design our modules, our subjects to bring out students who have a portfolio of skills that are relevant and that are going to be impactful for the organization.
And have you cracked that code yet?
In some ways we have, I would say. It's in an experimental stage. What we have done, which is, I would say, kind of unique, we know from research, like the Deloitte research, there is a lot of research out there, which has documented what are the human capabilities, in other words, competencies that future organizations, current and future organizations are going to be looking for. And these are resilience, adaptability, ethics and values, analytics, being creative, being able to work in teams. These are all about 6 or 7 of those. So one of the things that we are doing is, when the students come in the first 3 months of their being here, we have contracted a very well-established global organization which administers psychometric tools to understand these capabilities. And we are giving each student a profile of his or her profile, which says, these are the 7 capabilities we believe is going to be very important for your employment. Your employer is going to look like it for this. And here is a report which tells you, on this 7, which are your strong points and which are areas where it is not well developed. And then we have, both a curriculum and outside curriculum activities which helps them to kind of develop those competencies. So we believe this is probably will address the need, and we have rolled this out for about a year now. So in the next couple of years, we will know the results, but I'm very, very convinced that this is the right approach to the new demands out there in the market.
Okay. So Raman, you spoke about the fact that students need not really be worried about Gen AI, and it really won't come after, it will not take their lunch away. But it can be a great enabler for the faculty as well.
Yes.
So how exactly are you equipping the faculty at KJ Somaiya Institute so that it takes away the brunt of the monotonous jobs and helps them focus on the ones that is really important to them?
It's a great question. I don't honestly have a complete answer for it because, as you know, the whole Gen AI is evolving. But what has happened is that 6 months ago, if we had talked to our faculty, we were all more worried about the impact of Gen AI. The fact that any question paper that we give, they're going to use Gen AI, projects, they're going to use Gen AI. That concern has now been overcome. And there is an acceptance saying that, yes, but we can also use it in a very positive way. So one example is that there are faculties who are actually using Gen AI to generate sets of data, which they can then give students on how to solve the problem. Some very innovative faculty actually, while setting the question paper, actually give the answer sheets to the students saying this is what Gen AI generated as answer for these questions, so I don't expect these answers from you. Yeah. But I think that's at the still low level. What we are now trying to do is to really start thinking about how do we really use Gen AI in each of our subjects to enable students to understand the power of using Gen AI as an efficiency improving tool. So this is a learning process. We are actually doing programs with faculty development program as we call it, on using Gen AI into each of our subjects for this point. So I would say we have recognized it, we have accepted it, we see the power of that as but have we perfected a playbook on how do we do that? No, it's a work in progress.
So, while I was walking over here, I saw in very bold words the purpose that KJ Somaiya has, which is transforming together. I wanted to understand, it's a very powerful 2 words. So what is the genesis of this purpose, and also how is it that you instill it in each and every aspect of the students over here?
So there are two, shall I say, roots to the genesis of this transforming together. One is the fact that I've always believed that an organization needs to have a powerful purpose, because that purpose then rallies all the stakeholders associated with the organization towards that purpose. So, and of course, needless to say, then you need to carefully choose that purpose, right? And I must say, we have spent almost 6 to 8 months with professional people in coming up with this purpose statement of transforming together. The other reason for this is that, you see, to a great extent, both from the student's perspective and the institution and faculty perspective, there is this feeling that MBA is the beginning and end of everything, right? So the student feels that I pay whatever that amount, I get into a good business school, I get my MBA degree, that's it, my life is done, right? I'm going to get a great job, I'm going to become the CEO, etc. But the life, and we know that that's not true. And hence comes this thing that when you walk into a business school, it is the beginning of a transformation, right? And we, the institution, the physical, the intellectual infrastructure that is here, our job is to enable the transformation. So it is basically a recognition of that and then stating that in so many words. So if you go beyond it, is transforming together is the short form of it, but it's really we enable the transformational journey of individuals into value-based and purpose-driven leaders who build a better world. So there are several very important things that we are focusing on. One is the value-based leadership, right, which is ethics, morality, governance, regulations, respect for all of that. Purpose-driven. I think increasingly, as I said, I believe in organizations having a purpose, individuals. So I think it's also helping students to understand that, you should have a purpose, you should work for an organization with a bigger purpose, because then the quality of work and the output will be higher. And leaders who build a better world, I think for me this is the biggest catchword, because as you know, we desperately need to build a better world than what we have inherited. And who can do this better than business leaders, because it's in their power to really create products, services, the way they do business to create a better world. So that's the purpose statement, and the roots of it is the conviction that we need a purpose statement and the understanding that there is probably, we need a better interpretation of what a business school education is, that it is the start of a transformational journey.
Okay, so you just
and it also kind of in some ways emphasizes the fact that today you need to be somebody who is lifelong learner, right? Because learning doesn't stop, and because of the changes that is happening, so it is also recognizing that lifelong learning, and one of the skills that we are trying to impart here is how do you learn? Yeah.
So you are trying to create business leaders of tomorrow, who are going to try and have a very who are purpose driven in their corporate pursuits. And you also mentioned about the fact that it is going to be value oriented or value driven as well. It has, we have seen several instances in the past where businesses, even the biggest ones, have failed because the entrepreneurs over there did not really, they probably thumb their nose at corporate governance, at ethics, at guidelines. Now, while these are very easy to use terms and something that you can teach in a textbook, how do you actually make sure that the students understand the importance and the relevance of actually sticking to the right side of the law and taking ethics and values seriously as they step out of your threshold?
So I would say, let me kind of address it at 3 levels. So one is obviously there is a course. So it's a foundational course, business ethics. That we teach that in the first semester. And it's not just about the course, it is also how do you teach it. So we kind of have a lot of caselets where there are ethical dilemmas, then we present it to the students and they have to then take sides and make those calls and have discussions. And it's always interesting to see how those discussions actually progress, right? So that's one, because see, the only thing at the end of the day you can make students realize is the need to be ethical, the consequences of, crossing that borderline. So the class, the textbook, the caselets, the discussions creates that awareness. Then you also need to, in my opinion, build that muscle of being disciplined. It's the starting point. So much like a school, and many MBA, many students even have told me, we are in a business class and you're treating us sometimes like, it's about discipline. So we have kind of drafting very, very clear code of conduct. And we are also identifying that there are certain codes of conduct for which there is no second chance, right? And then there are certain discipline and behaviors that we expect of you for which there is, if you don't follow that, there is a consequence. For example, give me very small, we have recently introduced this thing where if the students are late to class by a minute or 2, the faculty close the door and the students have to then come down and get an exemption sheet either from me or from my administration head. Now, in itself, this is, you might say that, what are we trying to do here? But it is to make the students recognize that there are certain things which are, you need to hardwire into a DNA that time is time, right? If a class starts at 9 o'clock, it starts at 9 o'clock, not at 8:55, not at 9:02. And in the corporate world, there are many organizations where these are extremely important for employees to practice. So I would say one is the theoretical aspects, the discussion with caselets, real life examples. The second is by actually setting codes of conduct and telling students that there are certain codes of conduct that if you violate, there is no second chance. So I think these combination of these makes them aware of, the importance of being ethical, the consequence of crossing the border.
So while you're doing that, you're hardwiring all these very crucial lessons at a very young age. Do you also show them, case studies of the flip side, like maybe Sam Bankman-Fried and what happened with FTX, and saying that, had he been on the right side, had he not done what he had done, he could have been, reached the next level of business success. Do you actually even have that kind of arguments? The reason I'm asking is that students seem to, like they say, they are like wet clay, right? They imbibe a lot more when things are not put down on a chalk blackboard, They learn a lot more when it's interactive, and that's how conventional education is changing.
I think the way I would respond to this is to say that case study or case method teaching is a very, very important, large part of our pedagogy. And that's where some of these kinds of, whether it is Johnson & Johnson's Tylenol story and what would have happened. So these kinds of discussions then highlight, the case study, case method teaching essentially involves dilemmas and then discussing those dilemmas and, what happened. So I would say yes, yeah. But can we do more of it? I think definitely we can, yes. Yeah.
And what's the one feedback that you get from students? I mean, we have been talking about, what is it that you're doing from students, but I'm sure there must be something that students also say, okay, this is what I expect. I mean, I've spent so many weeks or months in KG Somaiya. This is what I expect. And how do you try to meet the expectations?
So, one thing is that we try to involve students in a lot of our critical decision making process. For example, right now we are in the process of deciding what courses should be taught in the first year, which is the foundation year. Because of all the changes, generative AI, etc., we have had a serious rethink about, are we teaching the right courses? And one very critical stakeholder in this is the student council. So we have actually given them the subjects and said, this is what we think we should be teaching. What is your input? And I can tell you, we've got some very, very good, input from the students, because they know the market. They know a lot of the peers in other institutions. They know what they are learning. So yes, we get that kind of, or we have processes for proactive kind of feedback. Now there are always other kinds of feedback that come, particularly when we implement something, they would come and challenge us. Yeah. Often on the placement area, there are lots of feedback that we get about how we should. But, it is also about recognizing that at the end of the day, they are the customers and we need to listen to them. Now, we may not be able to implement everything that they want, but if there are very valuable suggestions, which is in their interest, I think we really are open to listening to them and implementing that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Raman, I would like to know that currently business leaders need to have the right kind of mix of soft power, a bit of humanity, and analytical skills. So how is it that your institute is equipping them with understanding, the best nuances of humanity and making the right kind of analytical decisions?
Yeah, great question. So one, in the earlier part of our conversation, I talked about how we have identified about 7 human capabilities that are very important for success in the current world and also presumably for the future, for the next few years. And we talked about how when the students come in, they go through a psychometric tool administered by a global organization which is reputed in this, so that they get an understanding of what are their strengths and what are their potential development areas with respect to the 7 human capabilities that the workforce is demanding. So when they come in, they are already aware about a bit of self-awareness is already there. And then we have developed something called as the Student Progression Index. The Student Progression Index first recognizes that not all your learning happens inside the classroom. So consequently, the Student Progression Index, which has got it's on a scale of 100, has got only 45% weightage for your academic performance in terms of the CGPA, the grade point average, which is a reflection of how well do you listen to the class, how well do you learn what is taught in the class, and then write the exam.
55%
of the index then puts emphasis on a lot of other aspects, which we believe develops the person much more holistically. For example, we have this exercise where all the students have a faculty mentor. Or in other words, each faculty mentor has about 10 to 15 students in his group. Every week we send out an article either from The Economist, the British journal, or from Ken, the digital business journal in India, which is probably one of the best kind of insightful discussions journalism that happens there. And then we ask them reflective questions. And at the end of the week, they have to go to their mentor faculty, and the mentor faculty may choose to kind of use a group discussion format or ask specific questions from the article. And the whole idea here is that students need to be able to connect what's happening globally with what's they're taught in the classroom. So that is about 15% of the indexes there. Then we encourage students to go for certification, right? industry-led certifications, because this is again something which is hard skills that they learn, and they could also learn soft skills, right? Time management or other. But then it is an indication of the entrepreneurial ability of the student, is going that extra mile to get the certification besides his MBA or her MBA degree. Then we have 10% weightage for taking part in competitions, because when you study in business school, one of the things, there are lots of hackathons, there are lots of case study competitions, and we encourage students to go participate in that. And the last 10% actually goes for sports. So we believe that a good business leader should be physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually fit. And hence it is very important to inculcate the passion and the interest and the value of doing sports here in this school. So that's one set, the student progression index. Then I would also add one more point. There are certain subjects which many business schools teach in one semester. For example, business communication or leadership. We have chosen not to do that, because we believe that you can't teach these in one trimester and one semester, because these are things that take you need sustained effort to teach somebody business communication, good communication skills. So we've actually converted that into mandatory non-credit course, as they call it. And these are offered during weekends the entire first year, right? And most of them are experiential learning. There are projects that they do, there are discussions that happens in the classes, and there are no exams. So people learn in a very unconstrained environment. And last is about experiential learning is, we have something called capstone project, in addition to the internship, where students are encouraged to take a problem statement from a company, and we facilitate that. And they apply whatever they are learning and come up with a report, which might be sometimes useful to the company, because the young minds have some bright ideas. But more importantly, the student really learns about a problem statement in a real organization, and how whatever he or she has learned can be applied to try and solve that problem. So I would say these are some of the approaches that we have inculcated recently to ensure that there is a holistic development of the student, and not just one kind of dimensional development of the student.
So thank you so much, Raman. You have given us a great insight on how you are actually creating, like you correctly mentioned, a holistic aspect of the students, so that when you're talking about creating the entrepreneurs and the corporate leaders of the future, they are well equipped with all the toolkits that they require to become successful leaders that India can talk about and be proud of. Thank you so much for your time. All right.